So now we will talk about Stalker, which is sorry, I'm like banging on the like I just so yeah, we'll talk about Stalker by Andrei Tarkovsky, my favorite film, my favorite director. Um I watched this like right after I got sober um from like drinking and smoking and everything over like 5 years ago, and I wanted to like deep dive into Tarkovsky and try to finally connect to it because I had only seen Ivan's Childhood and Solaris and some of Andrei Rublev when I was like 19 or 18. And I was like, I don't think this is for me. But then, years later, I was like 27 and started this, and I had a different perspective at that point. So when I
Right.
watched this, like the film ended, and I remember sitting in my living room with like the DVD menu going on, and you could hear like the soundtrack playing in the background of like the DVD menu. And I sat there for like an hour just like thinking about it because initially I was like, I didn't nothing like happened. What the fuck? What did I just watch? And then I just sat there and I was like reading about it.
A little
And then
bit.
it like things started just kind of like pouring into my head, and I was like thinking back on shit, and I literally could not stop thinking about it for like weeks, and I just wanted to talk to everybody. And I think it was like a time when I was like when we were working together at TKTS, and I was also like, can someone fucking watch this movie so I can talk to someone about it? So that I finally got like Mark to watch it, and we had a huge conversation about it, which was really cool. And I was like, thank you. I needed to get this out because I didn't even know where to start. Like I didn't know how to approach this. I haven't seen anything like it personally, and um it started my whole like deep dive into Tarkovsky, which isn't super deep because he only did 7 major films. So uh yeah, it just kind of like changed me completely, but I've been obsessed with it ever since. And I always, there's sometimes where you revisit a film and you're like, oh, it didn't have the same impact, and maybe now that I'm older I have like a different viewpoint of it and it's kind of lost its charm. I've seen it a few times now, and every time I watch it I get something new from it, and I just fall in love with it again. And I kind of get scared every time because I watched it with a group of friends recently down here, and we um like of course like smoked beforehand and stuff, and I was like the whole time I was like, I don't think they're gonna like this because they're like younger friends of mine and stuff, and I was just like I just and they like a lot of stuff that it's not usually my thing, and I was like, I don't know if they're gonna get into it, but I'm glad at least they're trying to watch it, which is awesome. And then afterwards everyone was like, that was fucking great, and I was like, really I was like so happy. And then I watched it with two other friends the other day who I also was just like, I don't know if they'll get into it because it's as you saw is like very specific, and they loved it as well. And I was just like, okay, great. It seems it's more accessible than I actually thought it was, which is awesome. Um, and Jay Ray has watched it and stuff, and a few other friends that I've just been like, hounding for years. But yeah, I love it. Anyways, I am very curious because we have not talked about it at all yet. I am very curious whether you enjoyed it or not, or like what you got from it. What was your kind of experience?
I liked it. Yeah,
Okay.
I actually liked it. Yeah, a
Oh,
lot.
okay.
Um, I don't know that it's gonna stick with me for like weeks or something
Yeah.
like that, but I do want to watch it again at some point.
Yeah.
Um, it's always been on my list. The ethereal list that you
Yeah.
keep
That
in your
goes
head.
on forever.
Wow,
Yeah.
watch that because I feel like because I'm into post-apocalypse
Yeah.
nonsense and fiction and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and it is it's one of the like defining aesthetic sources for that kind of setting period.
Yeah.
It's like directly cited by a lot of things like the creators of the Fallout games, a lot of movies, comic books, everything, and they'll be like Stalker. There's a
Yeah.
video game, and I haven't really played a lot of it. I like gave it like 10 minutes one time, but
Yeah.
literally called Stalker. It's same thing. It's like a
Yeah.
post-apocalyptic Russia, kind of a thing, and it takes a lot from that. And I think that the book that Stalker is based on,
Yeah.
Roadside
Which,
or
yeah,
whatever.
Roadside Picnic. One of my friends who I watched it with the other day, um, I hadn't known until after or halfway through the movie, because there's like that one part where it goes part two of Stalker or whatever.
Yeah,
And because I was like, well, we can take a break real quick during the part two. And he was like, oh, I read the book that this is based on. And I was like, oh, I had no fucking idea. And he's like, yeah. I was like, how different is it? And he's like, well, there's a lot of like similarities and stuff. But then when we got to the end, he was like, the ending's very different. And I was like, I figured. but I'll say like just like a synopsis of kind of like what the deal is real quick. But so it's about this this place called the Zone that apparently years ago a meteorite came into Russia, basically, or I guess, do they say it's Russia? I know, I mean, it's in Russia, but like, do they say that, or is it just like a land?
I don't think that they really
Yeah,
say anything. The
yeah,
city that they live in is never identified.
yeah.
The land is, yeah, no one ever says
Okay.
it's just, it's very
I don't know
Russian,
why. Yeah,
but
I know. I immediately was like, "This is Russia," and I just never was like, "Oh, I need to hear otherwise." So, but yeah, it like hits the land, and then people find out that there are, you know, strange happenings in this area that where this happened, and the government has shut it down completely, like all around it. But also, people are afraid to go in there because the people that have gone in there, or people that were there when the meteorite hit, have like disappeared, died, just like weird circumstances that no one really can explain. And you know, you hear about this place called inside the zone. There's a place called the Room, and apparently, if you go into this place, your deepest desire, like in your mind, could possibly, like, apparently comes true. And so there's these people called stalkers that basically are tour guides of like trying to get people to go to this room so their, you know, wishes can come true and stuff. But some people don't make it out alive, and some people um you know, get lost or something. But then some people apparently have had their desires come true, but maybe shortly after, you find out like one character apparently went in there and then asked for something, but it wasn't exactly what his deepest desire was, and it was totally something that he I guess didn't want to admit to himself. Like he was trying to save his brother from prison, but then ended up just becoming very rich, and it didn't save his brother because apparently that wasn't his biggest desire. His desire over his brother's life was just being rich. So he killed himself like a week later out of guilt. So which you find out more about this because the stalker lets the people that he brought with him know different stories. So he's bringing in a writer, which is just known as writer. Stalker is known as stalker, and then the other person there is professor. And you know, the writer's a writer, professor. So he's taking these people, and they have their own reasons for going. Clearly, for, you know, the writer obviously wants to. He's I guess the more cynical one, and wants to like
yeah,
like just be like, well, let's see what's up. I'm seeing is believing kind of a sort of situation, and it'll be good for his writing career because he might win a Nobel Prize or some shit. And the same with the professor who wants to know, you know, learn from this, but also has a different kind of plan that we find out later of why he's going there. So it begins with them meeting at a bar and then sneaking into the zone through a rail car and going through the gates and being like shot at and stuff, which is like as action packed as it gets in the film, is the little shootout. And
yeah,
it starts in this like brownish, like
P2,
coloring,
yeah,
yeah, of the film. And then the rail car scene, which stays with them for a while, and you start to hear the music change a little bit as it goes along with the sounds, and you start to kind of like descend into the zone, and all of a sudden there's not even like a transition, it just immediately cuts to color and they're in the zone, and it comes so quickly that it's almost like you don't see it happening until like shortly after. We're like, oh, it's completely changed, we're in the zone now, like there's color to the film now. Because I remember I've watched it with a few people, and they also like have had a reaction where like, oh, I didn't realize it's in color now. It just kind of fell into that, and it totally slipped by my like realization, which I thought was a cool way of doing it instead of making it a big like, yeah, you know, like Wizard of Oz where you open the door and it's like Technicolor, like, you know. But it's still like the colors are so like earthy, and it's like greens and blues and browns and stuff like that, which it's just I think just a beautiful transition, because you can also just see how just how in nature it's kind of around. It's where they came from was so like industrial, where it just kind of, now they're in a place where none of that's there, and it's such a weird shift because you start to feel like you're there too. But yeah, so I'm curious like what was your feelings like as you were starting it and stuff, because it does kind of approach things pretty slowly, where it's like, you know, the way it pans into the room and kind of shows you the characters, stuff that clearly there's like maybe some issues because you see some like syringes, and you kind of pick up little clues about the people along the way.
I don't mind a slow film.
Yeah.
And like you said, it does pick up. So it's not
Mhm.
like it's just a slow film. It's not
Mhm.
a slow burn the whole time. It does have a slower start, but or more restrained start, but
Mhm.
that's fine. I don't mind slow film. And so I wasn't really bothered or anything at all. And I thought that his acting was great.
Yeah,
There
the
was a lot.
Stalker.
Yeah,
It's one of my favorite performances. I think he's fucking
he
amazing.
was good until her emotional meltdown, and I was like, why is she just like sitting
Writhing on the floor.
writhing on the floor? Exactly. I was like,
Well, yes,
where's
and
she
that's
like,
yeah.
oh,
Ah!
like an Oracle of Delphi kind of
Yeah.
thing. I was like, this is going on a little
See,
long,
and
but
that's what I thought the first time, and now that I've watched it, I appreciate her performance even more because I think by the end, when you get her final monologue about like, I was basically told my life was going to be miserable with this man my entire life, and I
yeah,
still went with it. And even though I'm living kind of this like miserable existence, I still have him and like my daughter, and I don't regret it really. It's just I have those moments, and like she loves him so deeply and cares for him that even when he's like leaving, he could possibly die and just abandon them in a way. And I can see her, just having that moment to herself in the room and just like having that purging of emotions. It is excessive, but
it's
also I have come to terms in a way of like, I guess having my own explanation for it that works in my mind. So I was just like, great. And especially because she has her last moment at the end where she kind of explains, like, hey, listen, this is the deal with me. And I was like, I thought it's such a weird thing that
it
happens
is
because like
really weird. Yeah,
because well, it's like because the movie ends where like, we'll get to it, but like they leave the zone. And you're like, okay, so blah blah blah. And then you feel like it's gonna be they're gonna wrap it up, blah blah blah. But then you get this full like blown monologue, this scene with her and him, and then that's like a one scene that you're like, oh, this is strange that it's just kind of going. What else is there? And then you get the final moment, which we'll get to.
yeah.
Okay. So how what did you think about the long like rail car? Uh
I didn't think that was that bad. Look,
okay.
he did not, because we've had this before. Memoria. I was like, oh my god, it
Yeah.
just forever on
Yeah.
one shot with nothing. It's not quite that.
Uh-huh.
Um, a there's some movement, right? And we're on what's his name's face, the writer's face.
Yeah.
He's actively going through some things,
Yeah, they all are.
thinking.
Yeah.
You see him like even like falling asleep, waking up.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long. It didn't feel like it took forever. Not
That's
like Werkmeister
oh
harmonies,
yeah. Them
right?
walking.
Yeah, but like it's, and again, payoff as well,
Yeah.
because it is a transition. It's a transition shot, and then you get this payoff of suddenly you're in this completely new environment. There's color now,
Yeah.
and it's this really sweeping vista. It's this beautiful shot, and I
Yeah.
actually really like the way he shot that whole movie. The
Yeah.
shots are.
It's
We can get it.
fucking beautiful.
We can get into that, yeah, in a minute, but
Yeah.
the payoff, and I didn't think it was that long.
Mm.
Uh,
Well, that's what's cool about that scene is that even having like because you end up putting yourself in a situation too where it's like you're on this ride with them and like you're going to this thing that could be potentially fucking life changing,
yeah,
and it's like but the only thing you can do right now is wait. So like you're in that moment with them just like, okay, well, we're away from the danger, we're going into something that could potentially be dangerous but also life affirming, life changing, and everything. But right now all we can do is sit here and sit with our thoughts. So it's like, and you see them kind of like just being there with themselves, even though they're like the three of them together, they're all kind of closed off, not talking. They're just being there, just like, okay. And you can see them kind of, you can imagine just what they're thinking and what kind of things are coming up in their mind as they're on this trip there. And that's what I think is exciting about scenes like that, even with like Werkmeister harmonies and like Memoria, is like you start to put a little bit of yourself in there and try to like think of things of like could possibly be going on in the minds of these people during this moment, or why is this so significant? And that whole train ride, I remember it didn't really catch me in a place. There's a movie called Distant by Nuri Bilge Ceylan. He's a Turkish director, and there's a moment where it's like two cousins, I think they're cousins, and they're like in a room together, they barely know each other, and one of them's watching like porn on TV, and then he immediately switches to Stalker, and it's the train scene, and the guy comes in, he's like, what you watching? He's like, oh, just a movie. And he sits down, and he's just like, and it's just with them watching the train scene, and he's like, all right, I guess I'm gonna go to bed. And he like leave. It's so fucking funny, but it was like perfect. It was just like this like perfect thing that I will always like think about, because when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's fucking hilarious, because I watched it like right after I first watched Stalker. Also, I think you would like that movie too. But
yeah, I didn't think it was that long. It just
yeah.
didn't. And you know, you have a little bit of like I said, you have payoff visually. But you also get like, there's a lot of, I've saying, you focus on the writer and his face and what he's doing.
Yeah.
And then you have a little bit of payoff too in his performance, because when they get there, he's kind of like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like,
and I love him. He's in a lot
like
of
no respect for it at first, or he's
yeah.
like, hey, we're out in the grass, you're throwing bits of these little nuts around.
Yeah, I know.
You're saying I can't just walk to the thing? Why?
Yeah, because it's right there. That's what's crazy.
Yeah, this is dumb. This is all dumb. And he's like there for inspiration.
Yeah, he's completely doubtful of the whole situation. He's like, y'all are fucking stupid. But then, like, it's great. First of all, when they get off the rail car, and it's like dead silent almost, but then you hear like the howling of like some animal. And then you start to hear animals here and there, which I think is understandable, because even though there's like no people, I feel like the reason why there's no people is because later on with everything that goes on in the zone and whatnot, it's all about like connected to, I think, like human consciousness and stuff like that. So with the animals, they're just kind of like living without that kind of the weird human consciousness,
higher thought process.
Yeah, it's just they're just existing
with anything.
So which, and I love the moment when, because the whole time, like, the stalker's like just miserable, and then he like walks off a little bit, goes to the grass, and like lays in it, because he feels like he's like finally home. And you see him come back like, hey guys, you ready to go on our trip? Like, just like, not exaggerated, but he's like, you see him kind of with a pep in his step and a smile on his face, or a smirk, and you're like, oh, he loves this. He's like, this is where he feels at peace. This is his thing, which was kind of, and I hadn't really noticed it too much until this like recent watch, where I was like focusing on him more and his like personal experience with it. And I was like, that's so neat that he's just like, I'm finally home, even though it's like this dangerous, scary kind of place. Well, like, because he has such a respect for the place in general too, where it's like, I'm not gonna test it, I'm not gonna do all these things, which the writer does, and it kind of backfires. And even the professor has his like moment, which there's that moment that I think is so, I mean, amongst the entire movie for me, but like, there's a part where you see like tanks and like cars and other shit just kind of like completely look like they've been blown apart and shit. There's just like in shambles everywhere, like across fields, and there's like the camera's like creeping through one of the things, and you see them like turning around, and it's almost like they're being watched. And it's such a eerie environment, but it's also so beautiful. It's this weird kind of feeling where it's just like, you feel like the need to definitely just like respect the place and just be like, let it do its thing, instead of like invade it and make it I guess worse, or react. And the part where they go to the house where the room is, and they're like standing a little bit away from it, they're like, we can't go that way, we have to go around it, otherwise we'll be fucked, because there's traps, even though they don't really see any of these traps, they've just heard about them. And the writer is like, well, I'm gonna go. So then he starts walking towards it, slows down a bit, and is like, well, maybe there might be, and starts to doubt his own kind of doubts. And then you hear like the stop, don't go further, or whatever. And he's like, and the two others are like, why'd you say that? And I didn't say it. And then he's like, why did y'all say that? He's like, we didn't. It was like, so then was that was that some subconscious thing that I did and I didn't realize it? Was it something that happened in the room? Was it actually one of them? Like no one really knows, but they're all kind of on edge at that point. Like, all right, we'll go your way now, which I love that moment too, because and then you see it's so fucking cool. While they're having this like talk right afterwards, like a huge fog goes over like the house, like almost as if it wasn't there, and as they're leaving, it starts to go away again, and it's so cool because the environment shifts too, and like when he's walking towards the house, that's when the wind picks up and stuff, and you're like, oh fuck, what's about to happen? So it's like super suspenseful, even though like nothing's really going on. So
Really
it's just
a trap, or
yeah,
barely see the consequences of
yeah,
one.
yeah. Except that moment where you're like, oh, there is something that's possibly
Yeah.
here. Is
Well,
that like little
tunnels after the tunnels.
Oh yeah, and then the tunnel in general I love because it is so creepy
Yeah.
that you're like something has to happen here, and then it doesn't. And it's like and it's they spend a while going through it, and it is so tense because you're just like because it's just dark, it's creepy as shit, it's beautiful looking, like the way it's shot is incredible, and
Yeah, just traveling down with him.
yeah, and he's going as slow as possible because they throw the writer in there because he picks the longest match or whatever. Even though the stalker basically kind of tricked him, I guess, to be the one to go. Because he's the most skeptical. So it's like, well, fuck you. I'm gonna put you ahead since the two of us are showing at least a little bit of respect, or so he thinks so of the professor at the time, who then goes back to get his satchel or whatever. He's like, no, you can't go back because if you go that way, things change and you could not come back. You'll just disappear forever, basically. And he's like, I don't care. I'm going to go get my bag. So then he just like disappears. And then you find him on the other side, just like, oh, hey, guys, what's going on? And they're like, what happened? He's like, oh, I just got it and I came here. Yeah. And he's like, oh, so they're playing a trick on me. And like it gets in the stalker's head, too, because then he saw the little the bolt with the thing hanging. He's like, oh, this was Porcupine, the last person who was here. And it's like, well, you saw that a second ago hanging there, and that could just have been something you had thrown previously. And it's like you're trying to like make sense of it in any way you can to go with whatever belief you have of the place, which I think is interesting from his.
I noticed that you see him grapple with the notion that maybe he doesn't understand the zone as much as he does.
Yeah.
And I also wondered if there was a little bit of like, fuck, I could have died any second there.
Yeah.
And I had no idea, like, because he's like, I'm not taking any other step until
I need to take a nap. And that's what's really cool is too, like you see that moment where it goes back to like the brown kind of like filter of when he lays down, and you can see it's him basically falling asleep and having these dreams of the zone, and that's when the dog appears, and you're like, where the fuck did this dog come from? And so and it's like, and then but you only see it in his dream at first, and then you see like a shot of it coming up in the real life, and then it's just kind of like gone again, and you're like, why is this dog just chilling here in the zone hanging out? And it's like,
did he manifest the dog?
That's the thing. It's like, did that come in as like a sort of like companionship he was desiring or something, like just from having, because stalkers end up having effects from the zone, at least in their children, and that's why his daughter is paralyzed. And or so that's like what they believe is the issue. And so like it's like we don't really know the powers of this place. It's just we only know certain things and rumors and things that we've been told. So it's weird because the dog does kind of follow around them, but it pops up at random moments. And there's a moment after they go through the meat grinder and they're like in the house area where the room is, that it's sitting there, and behind it are the two bodies that are like the two skeletons clinging to each other, basically. So I'm assuming maybe that those two were possibly with the dog, and the dog like hasn't really left their side and is just kind of roaming around. But who knows? Like you don't really get it. There's a lot of just like you just kind of have to puzzle piece it in whatever place makes sense to you, and it makes sense in a lot of places. So, and that's like most of the movie in general, where you're like, I don't really know what this is, but it could be many things. Like even like that bird flying through the sand dune area, and then it just like disappears and comes back, like it's a weird like editing trick. It's like what what the fuck happened there? Like, was that like some magic bird moment? I don't really know what was going on. Yeah, exactly. It could
When
just
the rider runs off a little too far ahead again, and then he's like inexplicably knocked down.
Yeah, and that was that whole room is so fucking cool. That's where I want to be married, in the sand dune room. I'm gonna sneak into Russia and have a gay marriage in the sand dune room. Oh, also, I don't know if you read up on like the movie, but like most of it was like the first time they filmed it, all of it got like completely fucked, and they literally had to go back and redo the whole movie basically. And there's one shot that was left, and it's a part where they're talking about like where like music miraculously penetrates the soul, like it's like something unexplainable about music that just everyone can kind of agree with, and it does something to people that comes from a place that no one really understands. It's just like an assembly of sounds that somehow triggers emotions in people and stuff like that. And which, I mean, the whole film is about like faith and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just interesting how he like kind of correlates all that with music as well, and unexplainable things, and just having faith and stuff, and where it can take you and where it couldn't. And it's just having faith is probably better than having none at all or something, which I thought was interesting. But so they make it through the dream. Like, he has his little dream, and you also see things in the water. It does like a pan against the water, and you see like religious texts and like paintings and syringes and stuff that is clearly in his weapons, stuff that's in his mind, and possibly stuff he's seen there. That's another thing. It's like, is this stuff that he's seen while he's there, or is it stuff he's imagining from his own experiences in this like muddy kind of water in his brain, like in his mind, in his sleep, his subconscious, and trying to piece that into it as well. It's like, well, why is this here, and why is he thinking about this? But it's interesting that he thinks of the dog, and then the dog's there, and maybe he's been there before and sees the dog here and there, and that's like his little zone friend or something. But then he brings him back, which I think is the best part of the movie. So, he gets to have
my favorite part of the movie too.
The dog, they saved the dog. Yeah, I was so
like, man, I want that dog.
Like, I was like, it's so cute. It's just hanging out. Yeah. But they go through that, and then they end up in the area, and they have like the three of them kind of come together and have their. Oh, there's the part where they go into the room, and the telephone rings, where they're like having this argument with each other, and then all of a sudden it's like, and then there's just a telephone there, and it's like, what? No, this isn't the clinic. And then they like are bitching at each other, and they stop, and they're like,
yeah, I love that moment actually.
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck?
Like, wait, I thought they just did they already leave? Like, you know, because the writer says something of like, well, here we are all now, blah blah blah. And I was like, did they like leave or something already?
Oh,
or
no.
they left? And he picks up this phone nonchalantly, and I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, did they go? And it's not until they stop and they all look at it.
Yeah.
The stalker's like, don't fucking touch it.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Some shit is happening. Like,
that's another thing. It's just like, oh, there's not supposed to be, electricity here, or like that makes no fucking sense, because no one lives like miles and miles and miles around here. And then they also turn on the light, and it comes on, and then just like kind of just blows out. And so they're like, okay, so there's like electricity here for some reason. And then that's when the professor calls.
He's like, I'm calling Doctor.
I made it, bitch. Yeah, and he's just like, you fucked my wife. I'm gonna yeah. And it's great because you can hear like the other end, and the guy's like, I know you're mad at me for sleeping with your wife, blah 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 and stuff. And he's like, well, I'm gonna destroy the thing. And then you find out like, oh, this professor brought a fucking bomb to blow up the room, because anybody could go in there, like wish for like.
I was like, huh, that's true.
Yeah,
you should blow it up.
Yeah, where you're like, someone could go in there and be like, I want all the power in the world, and like ruin everything. It's like,
what fucking dictator, Hitler, Donald Trump could walk into that room and just be like, what I want really is everything.
Yeah,
and it's like, well, then
I know, and that's
he's right.
And it's like, are your deepest desires something that I guess it's like morally okay, or is it something that could potentially harm human life and existence altogether? And
Yeah,
it's
it's like
and even the people that go in there, the three of them thinking like, oh well, I want this, that, and they start, after, because the stalker's in there being like, hey guys, there's all the like literally preaching to them the whole time about like what's going on and like what could happen and all these different things. And it's because he does fear the place, but he also like admires it so much and is so like mystified by it. And it gives him
oh,
this
like
like,
this is the ultimate therapy. You
yeah,
go
and
here when you've lost all hope, when you're nothing but despair,
mhm,
and you can use the room to get out of that situation.
yeah, at
And
least know that
really,
it's an option. Like, yeah, it's
yeah,
a real option that happened, or so you've been told.
and he's like, and he's also his big like um counterpoint to the professor being like, well, what if the wrong person, the most evil person or persons get a hold of this, and it's just like we're fucked then. If it can
Yeah,
really make anything happen, we're like humanity's fucked, like the
yeah,
world's fucked. And he's like, well, I would never bring someone like that.
yeah.
And it's like
But how
it's
do you know?
just down to your sense of character, like
Yeah,
of a person's character. And the writer even tells him, he's like, well, you really are a poor judge of character since you brought me
yeah, exactly.
a person.
Yeah.
But I love the writer. He's
Oh
fantastic.
yeah, he's such a
He has
dick,
a real moment that I
but
love
he's,
in the movie
yeah.
where he's like, oh, I get it now. I
Mhm.
understand how this works. I think
Yeah,
he like we'll talk about that when you're ready to. But
yeah.
um, that was like the moment for me in the movie that I was like, oh,
Is that when in the sand room, or like right when they're about to go into the room?
when they're gonna go into the room, when they're having
Okay.
a conversation, when the professor's like, I'm gonna blow it the fuck up, and
Yeah,
the
he's
stalker's
just sitting
like,
there putting it
yes,
together.
it's
Yeah,
hope. It's hope personified or not personified.
yeah,
But you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
but yeah, where the writer's like, oh, I understand how this room works. You understand why Porcupine killed himself, right? And then he was like, because, and it's ultimately why the professor is like, oh, I don't need to blow this up. Where
Mhm.
he's like, what you think is your deepest desire isn't necessarily your actual deepest desire.
Yeah,
Then the professor is like, oh, well, there's no actual control over what the room gives you. So this isn't necessary. No one can go in going, I want to be emperor of the world and actually get it. It doesn't
yeah,
really work that way.
yeah,
And I think the big moment for me that really sticks out with me with Stalker is when the writer himself decides, and I mean, they all ultimately go that way too, where
yeah,
he's like, but he's the one who articulates it. He's like, I'm not going in there. I don't want my soul, I don't want to lay my soul bare to have it laid back out to me.
yeah,
Like to really be told because he's like, doesn't really want to he's like, I don't want to go in and think about my life and
yeah,
shit and reflect and blah, blah, blah. You have to really grapple with yourself only to get told that's bullshit.
yeah.
This is the real you. And then have to grapple with that. And he's like, you know what? I don't need to do that.
That's too much for me. Yeah,
I'm good just drinking in
yeah.
my
In
villa.
my villa with
Yeah,
my 5 dogs or whatever he
letting
has.
the women throw themselves at me. You know
Yeah,
what? Maybe because his whole thing was like kind of this artistic integrity thing where he's like,
yeah,
I don't fucking like writing because it's all bullshit in the end. I'm just entertaining the people. And I thought it was a worthwhile endeavor, but it's not. They just want to bleed you dry for their own, entertainment, essentially. And he's
and
like, throw everything at me for it. But in the end, it's all hollow and it makes me feel hollow. And
well, yeah, he could also go in there, come out
yeah,
a genius, and he'd still be eaten alive by people because
yeah. And
not
he was
everyone's gonna
like,
agree.
you know what?
There's no
I'm
fucking
fine.
point.
You know what? The
Yeah,
comforts are fine. I don't need this. And I was like, I think I would probably make the same decision.
yeah. I was like, I would be afraid. I would. There's no way. I was like, I don't trust myself enough like that. I was like, I don't know anyone. Well, no, I'm sure there are plenty of people who would go do it, but like I feel
Well,
like,
people did apparently, they do, but
and that's the
it's
thing is like these are all like hearsay. These are all like just like kind of stories they hear,
yeah,
but never really. know exactly like what happened. It's like
Well, the
it's
Stalker
like the Bible. Well, yeah, it's like the
never
Bible though.
seen
It's like these are
it.
stories that you hear and you just kind of like are like, okay, I mean, I these are warnings or cautionary tales or something, and um yeah, it's just wild. And I feel like The Room is a sort of like kind of like looking into heaven. Like you don't want
Yeah,
to, I don't know if you want to really do that, because I mean, you're going to find out eventually, but why live with that now when you could live in what's going on now? And I think it makes them all kind of appreciate, even if they're going through like a sort of misery or something in their life, they at least, there's a bit more control to it, I think, than what would happen if they were to actually go through there. And just like dealing with that kind of conflict within yourself is just maddening. So, and I mean, I wouldn't even know what to do with myself had I like gotten to like the threshold of that and then just like not gone in, I guess.
yeah.
It's just like live with that forever. But it's also like that's what they, I guess, the stalker kind of got out of it too. Like he at least like,
He gets what they avoid in the end
yeah.
because he himself is so invested in the zone and what it can do for you, and
Mhm.
that's why he gets destroyed, like metaphysically or spiritually, however you want to put it. In
Yeah.
the end, they specifically reject the room.
Yeah.
Writer articulates it, but the professor too. They reject it. They're like, "Oh, it's not what the stalker and most people believe it
Yeah.
is. It's 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 stripping away all of your, yeah, I don't know how to articulate it either.
Mhm.
It's sort of like all your preconceived notions about yourself and your life and what you believe being stripped away, and now you're really going to get the absolute truth of who and what you are and what you want and what you think and believe.
Yeah.
And they go, fuck that.
Yeah.
I with the question in relative comfort rather than the true knowledge. But in doing that, it takes the that away from the stalker, where
Mhm.
he's now like, oh, it's not what I think or wanted it to be.
Yeah.
My sense of purpose and what I believe is true has been completely rocked. So their rejection of it does that to what they're trying to avoid. What they decide
Yeah.
to avoid is what they inadvertently inflict on the stalker, where he's
Yeah.
it's the question's been laid bare now. Where
Yeah.
before he got to sidestep it, I've never seen a happy person. I don't really know what happens to them after.
Yeah.
I just believe that this is what it is when I'm leading them to,
Yeah.
and instead it's
And yeah, and he thinks it's
oh,
gonna bring them as
nothing.
much like joy and excitement and curiosity as it does him, but they kind of just, they're like nah and leave. And I think it's interesting because earlier in the film, like while they're still in the zone, he ends up bringing up like, he's like, it's better to remain um like moldable, bendable, like
Yeah,
full,
pliable.
like yeah, like instead of getting all this knowledge and becoming so hardened to the fact of like you lose faith and like your own happiness and stuff because you get all of these answers that work against anything that you once held close to yourself. And that's kind of like what happens to the two of them, and then it starts to eat at him too, and he like regrets it, and he's like, no, I want this one fucking thing that I have that makes me happy and gives me some bit of hope. And he thinks he could share that with people, but no one's going to have the same reaction to it as him. And he deeply cares for it and stuff, but it's like, so, and it brings up what happens at the very very last scene. Like, so do you think that he brought Monkey to the room, or do you think he went into the room and maybe asked for his daughter to be better, and in doing so she got superpowers? Just a feeling.
I don't know. I can't decide
Yeah.
what the end is. Is it anything he did at all? Because they say like like stalkers children just tend mutants. They just tend to come out weird.
Yeah. But
And
see, that was
the lack of the use of her
yeah.
legs, but has she had the power the whole time or
Yeah,
not?
that's, we don't know.
Because she doesn't seem particularly surprised or even enthused.
Yeah.
by her ability to move the glass, by her
Yeah.
telekinesis.
Yeah.
It's like she's like, oh yeah, I just do that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like idly drawing on the notepad. She's not like, look at the things I can create. She's just
Yeah.
like, yeah,
But that's what's awesome about that shot. Like that shot, like fucking shook me when I watched it. Where I was just like, because I didn't expect that to happen. It just kind of like feels like the main action of the film is kind of over and it's starting to like die down, and then you get that last moment of like the one moment that feels the most like sci-fi in this science fiction movie, and it's her with the telekinesis moving the glass. And then I think it's interesting that she pushes one fully off the table, where it's like this power that she has could be used for bad or it could be used for good, and you don't really know which way she's going to go with it. And the poem she reads beforehand is The Dull Flame of Desire. I'm sure you've heard J. Ray play the Bjork song a lot, but it's literally that. It's because that was based off of that poem and whatnot. But it's like saying, there is this flame that's still there, and it's like, is that something that could, she could use these powers for good? Could she use them for bad? Which is kind of like what The Room was in general. That's why I'm like, did he bring her there to maybe help her? Because he talked about bringing her and his wife there, like passing thought. Yeah, and like stuff like that. So, but you can see that they're in their house afterwards, but it's in color, which is interesting. So I don't know if, because it's in color, did they somehow, is it in color just because she is part of the zone? Like, did she bring it with her, or like was because she is a product of, him, that she is now has the zone within her, or the room, or whatever powers that has, like, did that stick with her because of him going through, or did he actually bring her? Did he go in there and go in there and wish for something and then found out like maybe what it was and kind of keeps her in hiding, or like what, like it could be a few things. So that's what I find fascinating. There is one moment that I hate, and I noticed it this time. And I'll point this out, and I don't know if anybody can like put a meaning to this or why it happened, but when they go to the bar again at the very end, where they like are done with their trip, and like the wife comes and she's like, who wants a dog? And there's like, we're gonna keep the dog. So they keep the dog. And before the wife like comes in, she sets Monkey down on the bench outside, and Monkey is moving her legs crisscrossed on the fucking bench. And I was like,
I didn't notice.
I was like, girl, you're paralyzed. What are you doing? So I'm like, how much is she paralyzed, or was it just a full-blown mistake? So I don't know. I'm seeing if anybody can actually make sense of that. But I saw it this time and I was like, girl's moving her legs.
I would say it's
like, huh?
I would say it's probably just a child that didn't, think about it, and they didn't notice. And
unless she's using her powers to do it. So, which could definitely, it's an excuse. So
I don't know. I haven't really decided.
How was your feeling when you saw the last moment? Like, what happened?
Well, this is the thing. I knew about it.
Oh shit. Okay.
I already knew about it. It wasn't a surprise. I've known about it for ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. It's one of those things that's just like, it's such an iconic moment.
Yeah.
That like I said, this has been on my list for a while, and it wasn't like I just heard the name and knew its significance and was like, oh, I would watch that someday. Like I've seen shots, I've seen it discussed, I knew about this. I've never actually watched the scene happen.
Yeah.
But I've seen a picture of her.
Yeah.
And I know about, it's like, because it's like, it's the craziest moment in the, like, so I was like, and here it is.
Yeah, great. Here's that final moment.
Here I am actually watching it, and I'm like, oh, it's interesting, the three glasses. And reading on more afterwards, I saw some suggestion that the glasses may be significant in terms of their relation to the three men that go into the zone.
Yeah.
And I don't know. But
one of them was like half full of like red whatever, maybe wine, I don't know, and then like one was empty, gets tossed over the side, which could be the Stalker, but the other one I don't know. And then it's cool because like right after that happens, like everything kind of shakes because they're near like the railway or whatever, or a railway. So it's like, oh, was this was this actually powers or was it like the railway doing it? But it was definitely.
Oh, she clearly moved
Yeah,
it.
that's the thing. It's like because there was nothing happening, and then you hear like the like anthem going on and stuff, and I just find that absolutely fascinating. I just remember watching that, and even watching it with like my friends recently. At the end, a few of them were like, I was like on board with what was going on, and in that last moment, I was like, I don't know what the fuck just happened, and I was like, I know, right? Isn't that crazy? Like,
It literally is like, I don't know that I would go as far as to say that I would have preferred it not be in there, but
okay.
I wouldn't say that is what I'm saying. But I'm like, almost in a way, you know, I do have the question of like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And it is kind of like, does it kind of fuck with things too much? I don't know. I haven't decided, and I
But
don't
even
think I would because it's such an iconic moment.
yeah, I would say even if you like talk to Mark Curry about it too, I just because I had like a really good talk with him afterward. We talked for like hours after watching it together, and he was like, you know, caught on to a lot of like the religious stuff and maybe the stalker being a sort of like priest sort of character, like um, you know, Jesus, God kind of thing, but like, you know, trying to keep faith in the world and trying to keep it, you know, with people as well. And people are starting to lose faith. And but he, you know, still has this deep faith within himself that he's passing on to his to like, you know, the younger generation, which is his daughter and stuff. So that could be like there is hope in the future. It's not completely dead. That's kind of like what he had taken it as from what I remember, and I can, you know, see that as well.
Because it is kind of do this thing of like, you know, the right-brained artistry versus arguing with the left brain, sort of like scientific logical side of things.
Yeah.
But they're both ultimately cynical about the human condition.
Yeah.
And then there's the stalker who is the more spiritual minded.
Yeah.
And whatnot. And then the two cynical art versus science ultimately reject spirituality entirely, and they're like, I'm happy my own thing instead of chasing, you know, this, and that fucks with the spirit brain more.
Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't completely parsed what I think of.
Yeah, I mean,
I did enjoy it a lot, and I thought it was worth. It's still worth thinking about. Maybe it is going to stick with me for a little while, man.
Yeah. So, and a lot of people have been fully, you know, inspired by his work and stuff. And you know, I don't know if you read. Also, you should go if you have. Do you have what's it called? Shutter. Okay, well, there's a thing called Cursed Films on there. It's not great, but it's there's an episode on
great. Like,
yeah, it's not good,
okay,
but it's like
it's
but it's kind of cute. They do an episode on like movies that possibly were cursed, like The Exorcist and Poltergeist and blah blah blah. And Stalker's one of them. And
yeah, I read about that.
Yeah, so I would say if you want like to watch something, it's just like a really cute kind of thing. It's not fantastic, but they do bring up a lot of interesting things about it because like with the film kind of being fucked and then everybody basically getting cancer from the fucking and dying later because Andrei Tarkovsky died 3 movies later. And so did like the main actor, like some of the actors and the people on set, because I mean they're sitting there trudging through toxic fucking actual like toxic fucking water.
Everybody, they're like, all the stuff you see is like, yeah, it's like actual stuff. They were saying that the snow in the city that you see was like toxic waste, and some white stuff in the water that they were all standing in and getting near. They were like, that was like runoff from some chemical plant, and they were like, I can't. It was one of the crew production team was like, I figured out it was from Stalker when, you know, blah 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 went, and then went, and then you know,
it's
himself.
So fucking crazy. Yeah,
it was all cancer, and they were all there for Stalker, and they were like, I knew that shit was like destroying us. Like,
you should at some point, I recommend you should watch his final movie, The Sacrifice, because you can see that just from like what it's about and everything that's going on it, that he was like on his deathbed and like dealing with a lot of like doubt and like his connection to religion and stuff. And that's the one I have like tattooed on my leg. It like it's a lot. And he also like teamed up with a lot of Ingmar Bergman's people, which is interesting because they both loved each other's work but never met because they were afraid to meet each other. Isn't that crazy? But he worked with Sven Nykvist, which is the cinematographer for a lot of Ingmar Bergman's movies. And on his final movie, they worked together. And Ingmar Bergman's son worked with him on there. And I think Claire Denis, French filmmaker, and like a bunch of other people but they just never met because they admired each other so much. They were like scared to meet each other or something, which I think is amazing. But if you watch that movie, it's nuts. Yeah, I'm so glad you finally watched it. I'm so happy.
Oh, I'm glad I finally watched it. Yeah. And I'm glad that I liked it. I was like, okay.
Same with me. I was worried too. I was like, oh shit. I led him astray with Memoria. I'm so scared. But I was like, I feel like, and just having like the validation of like other friends watching it, I was like, okay. I was like, if they can get into this, I think Tom will as well. So then when he said that, I was like, okay, yes. I was like, I figured if this is one that I was going to show Tom, I'm confident that he might actually enjoy this. So I was like, really happy.
I didn't actually, it's not that I ever thought that I wouldn't, but when I started, I was like, what if I don't?
Yeah. Well, that's my fear every time I'm going to watch something with someone on this, where I'm like, oh God, if I hate it, this is going to be a struggle. And I started the Miller's Crossing and I was like, is this going to be a Coen Brothers movie I find entertaining or one that I can't fucking stand? I'm so worried. And then it started going along and I was like, oh, I'm enjoying the hell out of this. This is so much fun. So I was like, this is great. I'm glad. Because I had a setup with someone not recently, when I was first doing the podcast and stuff. And I had watched the movie that they recommended. We didn't get to do the recording and stuff, but I watched it and it ended and I was like, I hated that. And I was like, okay, so when are we going to talk about it? Because I was going to watch it again to try to find something I enjoyed from it. I won't name the movie. And I will after we stop recording. But I was just like, fuck. But then they're like, oh, I can't do this anymore. I was like, okay, that's fine. We'll come back to it. So maybe I'll have time to watch it and maybe appreciate it later. But so yeah, I'm glad this was not the case. So okay, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Had a great time.
Me too. I'm sure I will ask you to do this again sometime down the road if you're up for watching another.
You should do a horror series.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And get a bunch of us to be like, let's trade horror movies and do that because that would be.
I will keep you in mind for that because I will 100% do that because I have a bunch on my shelf, and a lot that I'm super passionate about. So yes, absolutely. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. So thanks again.
Well, later on.